So welcome, first of all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to MoCA, and thank you for coming to this panel. And Bill Cardelopoulos isn't in this room right now, but thank Bill for asking me to moderate this. My name's Keren Green. I'm a librarian at Columbia University. I'm the librarian for Ancient and Medieval History and for the graphic novels collection. And I also sit on the board of directors of the Society of Illustrators and on the steering committee for MoCA Fest. So on many levels, I'm happy for you all to be here. But enough about me. I'm going to read introductions of our folks in no particular order. Well, in this particular order, but in no particular order. Keren Katz, she's at the top because I already knew her. Keren Katz is an Israeli-born cartoonist, writer, and illustrator, a recent graduate of SVA's MFA illustration program, and, quote, the illustrating half of the Katz sisters duo. She is also the half that is not fictitious. She has a number of self-published books, and her work has appeared in the New York Times and the Brooklyn Rail, among other places. No Press or NO Press?
Oh yeah, No Press.
No Press. No Press will be publishing her, oh, that sounds bad. That's like Ulysses, right? Saying, I am Nemo. No Press will be publishing her forthcoming book, but no, it's a press called No. Her forthcoming book, Uncontested Spaces, her table is?
C6.
C6. Alina, whoops, here goes the pen. Alina Gorban was born in Moldova, which was once Bessarabia.
Right.
Yeah, my grandparents were from there. And immigrated to Israel at the age of 6, I'm assuming with your family.
Alone.
She's a very independent child. She's been illustrating children's books in Israel for the past 2 years and is currently living in New York with her husband and 2 dogs, while she works on an MFA in illustration from SVA. She hopes to publish a longer form graphic novel in the near future and believes, quite rightly, that New York is comics heaven. Lior Saltzman is a recent graduate of the School of Visual Arts. Sensing a pattern here, with a BFA in cartooning. She's working on finishing her first book, a coming-of-age story set in Tel Aviv. She has permanently inky hands, a mad, all-encompassing love for storytelling, and a penchant for visual poetry. She's currently a nomad and is married, plus 1 fish. Nimrod Reshef is a writer, illustrator, singer, actor, and also the spokesperson for the Israeli Cartoonists Society. He studied art at the Avni Institute of Art in Tel Aviv and has been drawing comics since 1993, starting with Hebrew comics based on Beverly Hills 90210, which I wish I'd found images of those, my friend.
You recall that?
Of course. He's also known for Eddie Balagan and the series Uzi, which he began in 2005.
That's right.
And has co-produced work with his wife, Adi.
That's right.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to tell you that, I'm just going to stand a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you that I was asked to do this not because I'm in any way an expert on Israeli comics, but because I am going to be an avatar for all of you who may or may not know about Israeli comics. So I will be asking the questions that are on all of our minds. And I will tell you that my sole preparation in life for being on this panel is being a volunteer on a kibbutz in Israel in 1976 for 4.5 months. For having this book, my family bought this book back in '68, Dosha Kishon, So Sorry We Won, which is a series of comics about the 1967 war. And when I was in Billy Ireland Comic Research Library and Museum in November, I ganked this photo when I was getting a tour of the stacks because I thought this was the coolest looking logo I'd ever seen. And
Yeah, well, my wife did the logo, I must say.
okay, no credit, yeah. Okay. I'm like, ooh, that looks interesting, I want that. And I went home and I asked our Jewish Studies librarian to buy it for the library, so now we have it. So I'm
And next to Watchmen, I mean.
well, that's Ohio State, that's not me. But yeah, not bad company. So I am going to go through kind of historical overview. I'm going to ask you guys to talk about the folks that'll go up on the screen. And now I think I'll get out of the way and hide behind the monitor. And we'll start with the people who look to be the godfather and godmother of Israeli comics, from what I could tell, Dosh and Friedel Stern, or Friedel Stern.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's
Okay. Let's hear about these folks.
okay. Dosh is maybe the forefather of Israeli caricatures, since he and Ze'ev at the same time. There were two forefathers, so to speak, and he is this character that you see with the pointy hat. It's called a tembel hat in Hebrew, an idiot's hat, for that matter. So everybody wore it back in the 50s and the 60s. So this is like. Let's say Peanuts, or if I could, maybe Tantan for the French people. So this character Srulik, which is like a name for Israel. Israel Srulik is like the same, almost the same name. And Friedel Stern on the other side is like most definitely the first woman caricaturist in Israel. And now there is even once in 2 years, like a biannual competition that takes place in the Israeli Cartoon Museum, which it's like on behalf of her memory, and there's like maybe a $6,000 or $8,000 reward for the winner of that competition. And
Is it named for her?
yeah, it's named after her, and what. Since I'm the spokesman and I've been in the Israeli Cartoonists Association for so long, I have known that it's in her will. She stated that the cartoons must be not political and not about wars or something like that. It has to be like a gag cartoon. Since in her life of course she was against any violence and all that, but she was for the small stories, like the human stories. It's about those two.
I'd like to add something small about Dosh. Just a recent article I read that was published. One of the catalogs, there's an Israeli Museum of Caricature and Comics that was founded in 2007, and they have in one of the catalogs they were comparing characters in those early comics and characters today, and even though the stories aren't necessarily political, Dosh is associated with what like Israelis are, and what those characters were always children doing like adult things, bringing people into action, and they were talking about the way that all these characters from the early strips have these collared shirts, like stiff-necked, and there was something very, there was a need for conformism and solidarity, and people really related to that, and that's why that's one of the attributes that make him a symbol, whereas in the indie scene and all the comics that gets published today, most of the fabrics and the shirts people wear are like very flexible, flimsy, and you wouldn't see that. It's very formal for an Israeli society. Israelis are known for their like informality and
That's right.
no dress code, and this is clearly a dress code.
No starched collars in Israel.
Lior, Alina, do you have any? Do these people have any? Did Dosh and Friedel have any kind of resonance in your own development?
Well, for me, I more discovered them a lot later in my life. I didn't grow up with them because my parents weren't reading newspapers in Hebrew, so it wasn't like around in the house. But while I was learning, of course, illustration, they affected me like all how do you say, forefathers of the Israeli cartooning. So.
And it's so small that you can clearly map these out. I mean, it's one color
Yeah,
together.
exactly.
And Friedel, and all these, like Friedel was a legendary teacher in Betzalel, which is one of the main art schools, and there are stories.
Let me just add one more thing before we go on.
Absolutely.
Let's say that the history of Israel cartooning, well, it wasn't really exist up until these guys came along, because maybe it has to deal with the Torah, because in the well, you cannot draw images for that matter. So we were never, if you go to a synagogue, you will never see, of course, a painting or a person, like a figure.
No graven
So
images.
that's right. Up until the guys from the girls from Hungary came. They were called the Hungarian mob because, and it's a funny thing,
Troublemakers.
they didn't know how to speak Hebrew, and the only way that they could communicate with was drawing cartoons. So the five forefathers, Friedel Stern, Dosh, Zeev, Dov Navon, or this, I can't recall all of them. Well, maybe I
Well,
did.
we may see a few. of them.
Okay, so they're all from Budapest, for that matter. They gave us the first.
It's interesting because there's there's a Lithuanian poetic mob, and also just one woman, and then four men. I'm just imagining the.
Oh, those Lithuanians.
Well, generally, I think Hungarian Jews were known for being the more progressive and the more artistic and the more, kind of, not very, very secular in the way that people in Israel are secular now,
But it is also another point is that only like in the 60s was the first person that was born in Israel and started doing cartoons, because all of these people were immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the early strips are either clear rip-offs of American comics and Mickey Mouse, and also German cartoonists. And I think only in the 60s or 70s was the first person that studied illustration and did comics, but the rest they all came from different. These are artists too. But,
It's interesting that you mentioned Hungary, because next door in room number 1, there's Miriam
Katin.
Katin. Right,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. Who's
She's
from
Hungarian
Budapest.
born. That's
also,
right.
מתנדבת בקיבוץ.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she was. She was a volunteer on a kibbutz too. She lived in
We
Israel
have
for 9
occupied
years.
both territories.
That's right. And she's actually very. Oh, there was a little political thing there, wasn't there?
Just for the heck of it. Come on, guys.
She was actually very disappointed that she was scheduled against this panel because she really wanted to be here.
She got the big room. What she's
Yeah,
got to complain about.
She didn't know that at the time. So the name that came up from each one of you, I think, when you wrote and I asked about people who were kind of towering influences, were the members of Actus Tragicus. And I guess founded by Rutu Modan and Yirmi Pincus, but featuring also Batya Colton, Itzik, and if I'm butchering these names, please just smack me, Itzik Renart and Mira Friedman. So can you talk a little bit about what Actus Tragicus was, what it accomplished, how long its shadow has been, and how it's affected your own work?
I think the shadow is still effective today. I was educated by each one of this group in Shankar. They teach, they have it's like a legacy, It's they really affect, I think, most illustrators today.
And when was it founded?
I think the 80s, but when?
No, I think 90-something.
Really?
I think it
Not the
started
end of
with
the-
Rutu and Irmi wanted to do an Israeli version of the Man
right,
magazine.
right.
And then Rutu was at SPX promoting the property, and she told me, the first time I was at SPX was with Actus, and Actus were the first they wrote their comics first in English and then translated it to Israel. And when I read up on them, what comes up is that, well, for us, we're all cartoonists, so we live and breathe them, and they're also our teachers. But Israelis are not necessarily aware of the comics culture, and most of my parents' generation, or even people around me who are not artists, wouldn't pick up a graphic novel in a bookstore. They would buy a book. So they have a huge success overseas, but they haven't sold enough to keep them going in Israel. So that's why they write primarily in English. So I think it's the 90s, something like that. And they also collaborate with a lot of, like, Anke Feuchtenberger, who I saw her books up in Fromach. She also collaborates with them. And a few cartoonists, David Polonsky, who was the art director of Waltz with Bashir, who maybe you have seen it. he also did something with them for Red Herring. They
Dead
yeah,
herring.
Dead Herring. Yeah.
Dead herring.
Oh, hi.
That happened.
Hello. Also, I think they were just in terms of personal influence, a lot. They experiment with styles, and they've changed their styles. They do some stuff in black and white and color, and Batya, all her strips are like different. She really, really goes out there, and I think for art students, they really exemplify the spirit of experimentation and avant-garde, and their stories are amazing. And another person I should mention is Edgar Kurt, I guess, in their context.
That's right.
It's going to come down later.
And Edgar is also. Are you saving that for later? Okay.
He's going to go ahead. He's going to come up again, but go ahead.
Well, he's an author who his work has been translated, and I think a few of his stories were published in the New Yorker. And his stories are. Most cartoonists, my peers and people that are our age, but also Actus Tragicus and Asaf Hanukkah, who's one of the Hanukkah twins, who are also pretty well known. They use his stories because they're so timeless and surreal, and yet they have an Israeli attitude. So there is a bit like his characters are very underdoggy, very sometimes. Rude and wild, but he has, I think, the perfect. So there's a common pool of imagery and surrealism that also dictated their own visual language. That's very surreal and very experiment. This particular slide, though, of Rutu Modan, I remember her telling something that kept with me. It's her first. She started off. Like Batya, being very, who's on the bottom there, very drawn to anything that's not Israeli, anything that's Swedish or Gothic or snowy. But then she came back to...
She said she was affected by Edward Gorey
Yeah,
very heavily.
that was her first stuff. And then in this one that's shown there, it's her first story that she did that's political, that happens in Israel, in a kibbutz. And that's how she got the attention of Drawn In Quarterly and got commissioned to do exhibit wins. So that's the one slide that stands out to me in this.
I think like if Dash is emblematic more of like an old Israel, like idealistic Israel, kibbutz and things like that, this is more emblematic of contemporary Israel a little bit, the way you live. You see like, I think more, because I studied here and I've been here for the last 5 years, and I have been formed mostly here. This is the first thing that people are like, when I say I'm Israeli, this is the first things that people like mention, and they get this, like, so when I was working on this comic on Tel Aviv, they're like, people were like, it really has the feeling of what it is to live in contemporary Israel.
Yeah, and contemporary Israel, a lot of time, it's so different when you see it through the eyes of the media than you live in Tel Aviv. It is really a bubble. I mean, it couldn't have, it feels so weird that it's so news-centric about the media covering Israel, but so Dosh, the people we saw earlier, their stories were educating this new generation of Israelis growing up that they were very idealistic, have the Israeli ethos, which Dosh exemplifies, and the alternative scene, Actus Tragicus, is just, you know, comics is a medium of escape, and you can travel to new worlds, and you don't have to always tell the political story. It will seep through, and show that there can be many points of views included in comics, and many stories can be told through comics.
Keren, there is a gap, if I may say so,
Okay.
between Dosh and the guys and the girls from Tragicus, from Actus Tragicus. There is a gap that in the 70s there was a very well-known cartoonist in Israel. His name was Dudu Geva. And surely, he comes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And well, maybe he is the forefather of indie comics.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Israel.
Oh, okay.
So this collective of very
Yeah.
talented guys is one among many collectives. Well, not many. Israel is quite a small pond, right? But still, there were collectives of in the 90s or the beginning of the. That's right. That's Dudu Geva right there. Maybe he started this whole surreal, different way of looking at visual storytelling. Some stuff, he was hilarious, funny. And when I published my first book, I talked to him like maybe, it was maybe, I think Thursday night. I asked him to do the introduction for my comic book since I've known him since I was 15 years old. He said, sure. And on Sunday he died. Oh, yeah. So it's like, man, I should have grown faster.
Wow.
It's like,
Yeah.
and everybody who has been growing in Israel surely he knows his lines, his stories. He's he's a very funny guy and very. He's from Jerusalem basically, but he moved over to Tel Aviv, so he has. And they say that people from Jerusalem can really tell a story right, and
And what's wrong with the way people tell a story in Tel Aviv?
in Tel Aviv. Well, they do it over a cup of macchiato, and it's very short because they're always in a hurry. And in Jerusalem, you got time. I mean, yeah, well.
I want to go back actually to something that you said, Keren, about people would pick up a book, not a comic. And I'm wondering Dosh and Friedel, very influential, very important. They're going back a bit in time, and Dudu Geva, it sounds like, occupies the space in between Dosh and Friedel and Actus Tragicus. But how were comics originally kind of received?
Well, these two, the slides that you have on are it's a weird thing because they are underground cartoonists, but they're also published in mainstream media. So Dudu Geva had a column in the most important daily newspapers, and so Zev Engelmeyer
Was his student, basically. Zev Engelmeyer
Yeah.
is like the next generation of
yeah,
Dudu Geva.
and also they're really, really good friends.
That's
and
right.
his stuff is all over the newspapers, but they also have, they also self-published these very, very dirty, like I would say Zev Engelmeyer is the equivalent of R. Crumb. And he also. And Dudu Geva, another thing about the weird thing where comics is marginal and yet mainstream. So when Dudu Geva died, which was really tragic because he was very young, they put his duck character on top of the municipality building in Tel Aviv, and it was just like a Charlie Brown-sized duck character that symbolizes. People knew him because he was he had a daily strip, but it's still weird that this duck is in the center of the city putting comics in. And he said that it was his kids, because Dudu's spirit was comics is a cheap medium to make people happy, and it's so immediate. And his idea for beautifying Tel Aviv, he said Tel Aviv is so ugly and so dirty, but it only takes a little bit. Maybe if we put ducks on buildings, it could make things a little bit happier for nothing. Or like put opera singers on garbage trucks that are going to be there in 5 a.m. anyway, waking people up.
That's right.
And so. So Actus Tragicus they self-published and they put out books, but those strips, the early strips, were children's comics that were published in like children's versions of adult magazines or as like space fillers, or there are lots of newspapers made especially for children, because it was also a time where people were learning Hebrew, a little bit before Dosh and Friedel, like before Hebrew wasn't a spoken language, and these these comics had, and also people immigrated from all over, and they had to be sort of unified towards independence. And so they had to appeal to children who were the new generation in Israel to sort of involve them. So they were all in newspapers, I think, yeah?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
saying it right. I can't argue with that.
Okay.
I see you got Gilad Lichter there coming up.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I just want to ask a question, another question about Zev, though. When I was looking for images, a lot of these images you guys sent me, for which I'm very grateful. But when I was looking for Zev images, they all seem to be this kind of photonovela style.
Oh.
Yeah, because he cuts them,
is
he
that
takes,
his-
no, this guy is hilarious. Can I say something about this?
I wish you would.
Okay, well, I keep meeting him all the time in weird places in Tel Aviv, like middle of the night, because.
Yeah,
well,
he's,
Yeah, well,
Under
he's
the
always
dome.
there on the southern side of Tel Aviv. I get to see him. So anyway, this guy, what he does I mean, everybody now use computer, right? But no, he Xerox stuff, and he takes and he cuts it down to size, and he takes all the posters and old, images. He
Like,
cuts them, yeah,
dads and things?
with scissors, and he just glues them together. This is a real piece. This is not done in a computer. So he's, if you see his studio, it's like you got a head there, you got a leg there, you got a, and he does that. It's very nice. I don't think that I've ever seen anybody works in
I think there's
that way.
There's an added. It gives an added layer of meaning to what Israeli culture is, because he really goes out to these markets and flea markets and collects Israeli imagery and ephemera and postcards from the beginning.
Yeah.
And by recontextualizing it, he's giving. So, and he has this valley of the weird books. So at the beginning of the state, publishers were still not established. Everything was just a beginning, and they put out these really strange books with lots of typos and lots of printing errors, like printing over another. And he collects these and he puts them into his collages. He also has an insane porn collection, and he makes dolls. He collects vinyl dolls, and he puts them together, and then he records their voices. And about the manual doing of things,
That's right.
his big and most feared assignment in Betzalel, that's our art school, is it the 12-hour or the 24-hour assignment, where you have to work 24 hours straight on one drawing, and I think everyone does it in the same room and then give it. But he has to see you work on something for 24 hours straight and go mad over it. So that's just his way of
I think if we will translate what is written over
Oh,
there,
it's really
people will
funny.
get the
Yeah,
idea of Zev Engelmeyer.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes. You are the mother then.
Get up, Isaac. Dad wants to butcher you.
Sarah, our mother.
I did not know that.
Yeah, well,
That's so much funnier
Yeah.
now.
Oh, Passover is coming. If
sounds
if
better in
anyone
English.
wants.
Yeah,
So it's more
that's
harsh.
right. In Yiddish, it should be whatever.
If any Jews are in the room, he has a great Haggadah for Passover. That's in this kind of with. It starts off with Moses on like a camel, and there's a giant ass on the horizon and palm trees, and they're going to the promised land.
Ass like a donkey or ass like an
Oh, an
ass?
ass like a butt. But it's a great Haggadah for, but it's in Hebrew. But still, the
Good for the whole
collages-
family.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, I skipped ahead to this, but this is where I wanted to be anyway. These were
Okay.
the various names that you guys all mentioned when I asked you about your various influences, and a lot of these names came up from more than one of you. So let's just go through. Although one of these, I think, was this Lior? Was this you, Christina Kadmon?
Yeah, and I think she's an illustrator, and she's illustrated. This is Anne of Green Gables. This is the Hebrew version of Anne of Green Gables, and she's illustrated a lot of young adults books, and her illustration now is very different. But at the time, it was very evocative for me because it's a lot of very lush watercolor, and a lot of very lush, evocative black and white work. And for me, that was a big influence. And I think what Keren was saying is that seeing illustrated work and seeing comics, it was mostly in children's books, in children's publications, and in like things that were for young adults, and that is mostly where you would see them in Israel.
And the other book, Farm 54, which was translated into English a few years ago, and actually you can buy it upstairs at the fanfare booth in Aisle C. Galit writes and Gilad illustrates, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And they have, tell me about their profile in the Israeli comic scene today.
Well, I've known Gilad, mostly Gilad, because Galit is, she's the writer, but when we have a comic book conventions in Israel as well. yeah, we do. For 13 years in a row now. It's not half as big as
San Diego?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
whoa.
nothing is.
No, I was planning to say as Belgium's comics, or like Poland comics.
Fine.
But I've known Gilad Selector for quite some time. He's his lines are very emotional. His stories, his characters. I think he has three books already. The Ghost of Mongol, which was never translated, though it's much.
Oh,
funnier.
I think in French.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
He started out just like Actus Tragicus. He went to Angoulême, to the festival in France, which takes place once a year, and tried to catch a publisher's deal, like a book deal there. And a lot of, I think, maybe all of the Israeli artists who are now, there's a boom in comics in Israel. You could see, we haven't got there yet, but Michel Kishka's there, and we've got the Hanukkah brothers, which
we'll get there.
mostly they are first in, they succeed, or they do they start their career in France before they come to the States, because it's closer, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's true.
Much cheaper. Also, it is a combined influence of both European and American.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a
Because
weird
you're kind of
mix
in that
of it.
in that mid space.
And that book won the newcomer something. It won
Yeah.
maybe the judges. I think it was the newcomer artists for Angoulême on 2011, which is quite an achievement.
How many people have read it?
It-
All right, that's one.
it's-
now two,
it's-
three.
Three.
Okay, don't be shy.
It's a really.
You should read it. It's
yeah,
gorgeous.
It's a really
it's
beautiful
absolutely
book.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about the kibbutz, that, you know, if you want
Right.
to know what it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's very poetic and very beautiful.
I think kibbutzim aren't like they were even in my day.
No.
No.
I think my kibbutz, which is Kibbutz Negba near Ashkelon, is very commercial now, and it's like a corporation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back then it was just a bunch of old European Jews. It was nice.
Just like communism, I mean.
Absolutely, it was a completely
yeah.
socialist lifestyle, and
That's
you had the
right.
children's houses, and everybody shared the work. And
It's
I
a
worked in
sellout.
I know it's kind
Yeah,
of
well.
sad. I've gotten that impression from people on the
Yeah,
online
you're
who are
absolutely
unhappy with the changes. So speaking of the Hanukkah twins, Tomer and Asaf.
Yeah.
Asaf the realist, yeah, he's very well known for this comic, The Realist. Tomer looks less realistic, perhaps. Can you talk a little bit about them? They're clearly more influenced by European, I think, than American comics. To my mind, I mean, to my mind, especially Tomer looks like, you know, the heavy metal stuff I was reading in the 80s. So can you talk a little bit about these guys?
Can I?
Yeah.
I've just
Anybody
met,
can.
Yeah, I've just met Asaf in Angoulême this year. I was in Mexico. We were
The endless global
yeah,
comic
well,
circuit.
He was there as a part of there's a big fair that takes place in Mexico once a year. It's like a very big book convention, and we were both guests. And I had maybe 3 days with him, and it is amazing how we I think all Israelis or Israeli cartoonists were influenced by Europeans as well as Americans, as well as Israel was a desert. Oh, still part of it is still a desert, but it is a desert it was a desert for all. If you liked comics, there were no comics around, so we had to get by with whatever we found. So we had some Italian comics. Sergio Bonelli, if you know, Sergio Bonelli Editoria, like Tex, some stuff like that. You don't know it?
Italian comics, they love Westerns.
Yeah, that's right. We had great Westerns. We had Popeye comics. We had some of the American was translated horribly, and but that is and of course we had Asterix and the French comics. So there. If you can say something for Israeli cartoonists today, the contemporary Israeli cartoonists, is that they were influenced by everything, from French comics to manga to Italian comics. So, and it's different because Israel is so liberal, and people come to Israel from so many different places. The immigrants come from South America, at the same time from the Far East or from places in North Africa, and they bring their own culture and their own heritage and their own language. So, and it's like, it's a melting pot, and whatever comes out, sometimes looks like that. And
it's interesting that you mentioned that there is this kind of merged European and American influence, because those last three panels in the realist comic
Little
made me
Nemo.
think of Little Nemo.
That's right.
Exactly.
It's right over there. I think Asaf. I know Asaf pretty good, and he knows McKay's works. Sometimes he draws the superheroes that he always wanted to draw as a kid, and they are part of his realist. Weekly page, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how old are they, the Hanukkah brothers?
40,
39, maybe?
40, I was.
Alina, you
Yeah.
studied with Asaf.
Asaf was my advisor at the final project, and later I rented a studio actually right next to him and his brother, which was an amazing experience because it's really funny to see twins in the morning. You think you're hallucinating all the time.
Drunk too much the night before.
And they really, I mean, they are the essence of what illustrators should be. They work. That's it. They come and work and do the job, and they don't. It's not very romantic to see them work.
It's a living.
It's a living,
But it is a living. I mean, they make a living from it.
Yeah, I think that I'm really influenced by Asaf's work, the weekly comics, The Realist. I think what's amazing about it, it's always a really mundane subject, nothing really special or exciting, and he makes it so interesting and so, I don't know.
It's one of the voices that we got here in Israel, contemporary art.
Also, just a quick mention, so because they're twins, I think one was sent, or one went to study in, was it called the Beaux-Arts?
In
Asaf
France,
went to
that's right.
France, and Tormen went to SVA.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so they both separated.
Yeah. And now they're
after
working
the-
together.
And now they're back
working
again
back
together.
together in
Yeah.
Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's so interesting that Asaf went to Europe and Tomer went to America, because when I look at this, I would have thought it would be the other way
Yeah,
around.
the other way around.
So let's look at some of the influences that you guys mentioned outside the borders of the country. You mentioned Hergé. I think almost everybody mentioned Hergé. Jacques Tardy, Edmond Baudouin. When do these get translated into Hebrew? Do you read them in French? Do you read them in English? How do they enter your consciousness?
Only lately Tintin has been translated to Hebrew. I don't think that neither of us have read Tintin like when we were kids. But I've seen Tardy. I was in his in Angoulême this year. There was an amazing exhibition of
Yeah.
Tardi. Have you seen it?
No, I heard about it.
It
I
was
would
like
love to be in
the
Angola.
trenches. He writes war stories.
Yes.
Uh,
It was a war of the
it
trenches.
was War of the Trenches.
World War I.
What an amazing exhibition it was.
Unbelievable. The story of his grandfather, yeah?
Yeah, and he really been to all those places and made preliminary sketches, and it was really earth-shaking.
His
And-
draftsmanship is
Yeah.
extraordinary. And I wasn't that familiar with Edmond Baudouin. Who was it who mentioned him?
I think it was me.
Okay, tell me about him.
Well, actually, I grew up on Tintin because I grew up in Belgium, like Michel Kishke, actually, who is also an Israeli cartoonist and whose book actually came out a while ago about his childhood, and in Hebrew. And like you're finally starting to see graphic novels in Israeli bookstores, which feels really amazing. But so growing up in Belgium and with Tintin, I was like, wow, comics, they're really a thing. So ever since then, and because I grew up in the Francophone side, I speak French, which
Maybe
opens up a big world for me
Indeed.
of these comics, because Baudouin hasn't even been translated to English.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I hope he will be.
beautiful.
Yeah, he has really beautiful,
It's
luscious
gorgeous.
ink work, and a luscious ink work is a thing for me. Sorry, but yeah, very poetic, nice stuff, and he also started doing comics very late in life, which I think is he started doing comics in his 40s because his brother
Wow.
was the artist in the family, and there could only be one artist in the family.
Really? Was his brother a fine artist, a gallery
Yeah,
artist?
yeah, I think so.
Successful?
I don't think so.
Oops. So he saw a gap that he
Yeah.
could jump into. Well done,
Yeah.
him. And I think, Lior, was it also you who talked about Daniel Clowes and Charles Burns? Or was that you, Alina? Sorry, Alina. So now we have some influences. Well, we could say influences from America, but of course this Charles Burns piece that I've put up is heavily influenced by Hergé. So we've got a real hybrid
Twist.
here. Yeah, we threw a curveball here. So talk a little bit about Clowes and Burns and how you came across them and how they affected your work.
Well, I guess, stories. I just, they have, I'm really, in Daniel Clowes, it's again the stories that are more like life, but then you have some kind of weirdness in them.
Yeah.
And I'm really attracted to that because I really like reality. I know that I think
That's
reality
a
is
good quality.
interesting,
That's a good quality to have.
So he affected me a lot in the way he tells stories, the way I don't know how to say it, but the page in Daniel Clowes.
The layout of the page.
Yeah, it always stands as a whole. You know what I mean? Not only you don't need to see the other page. It's an artwork as
Yes.
it is, and a story as it is. I don't know how he does it, but it's always like this little thing, and it becomes a whole in one page. That really affected me. And Charles Burns, he's sick. I love him. I mean, what's not to love?
And I think, well, I came across these too, but in English, just in English. Nothing
Yeah.
is translated into Hebrew.
Yeah, it's not.
But I think,
And it
I
will
think-
never be.
and it will
Yes.
never be
No,
because it
for
won't
what?
sell. And people who are interested like us or who study illustration will, that's the thing, that Israelis speak English very well. Everyone, we study it for a lot of years in high school, and so it
We're
really,
pro-Americans.
Yeah,
You can-
come
yeah.
on.
But-
Our culture is so American.
yeah, but that also means that nothing will be, that it won't seep, it will only seep to people who are just privileged enough to get a good education and know English and read it, like people who
Right.
are the,
No, but you can get those books in Israel. I
Yeah.
mean, you got
you can get
comic
it in
book
Israel,
stores.
but they're in English.
I,
Yeah,
But
well,
people,
I think,
some people, in the peripheral areas of the country don't really can speak English to the level of Daniel's Close satirical like depth and
Yeah, it's pretty colloquial and
Yeah.
idiomatic.
and so this will, until it gets translated, will remain like obscure from. But I think what does draw Israelis into it is the combination, like you said, of reality and then just a little bit twist. Because we do, I was talking to this with Amitai Sandi. So he has this thing where he says that
There's another
the
creator from
imagery-
another collective
Oh,
called
yeah.
Dimona.
Yeah,
Okay?
the imagery
seriously.
that we see in the news is so harsh and like there's so much of it that we, when Rutu Modan draws a suicide bombing, she draws it with her own style, so it takes it away just enough. You can't sit down and read it while it's part of your daily life, but it does make for the best dramatic stories. So you either need a stylistic distance, or just that little bit of a twist that you can imagine going. So there was a lot of political cartoons going on, especially in the 70s, I think, and but ultimately, alternative comics is more towards entertainment, and people that, the story is the main thing, not the agenda. It's so hard to take that in. I mean, comics is, yeah. So I think that's why we're all drawn to comics, because it's that kind of medium that can take us away.
I have like a technical remark. I mean, I think a big influence, and I don't know if it was the same thing for anyone, but the first Israeli comic book store opened, I think, 10, 12 years ago in Israel.
Comics and vegetables?
No, actually,
Kamikaze was the first
was
one.
the first one. And it's made it much more easy to
Yeah,
access comics.
That's
So
right.
I think there's a new generation of people, because I was 15 years old when it opened, and it was really, really amazing to be able to go to a place and pick up Craig Thompson, like things like that. And before that, it was like you had to find some place to order it from the internet.
No, but
so-
there were comics. I mean, not comics stores per se, but there were like CD stores that sold comics. I mean,
Yeah, but,
I bought comics more than 12 years ago.
Listen,
no,
you
I'm
young
saying-
girls, you don't know what you're talking about. I was growing up in the 70s. We didn't have nothing. You're talking about ordering stuff through the internet. Are you kidding? We had to buy those. We had to ship them from Mile High Comics, or we got these catalogs. We paid for those catalogs, and they were overdue, and you never got the right package. What you ordered for was never. I mean, it was hell for a comic book reader or a collector. But I think we achieved something by if everything is accessible. I think some of the mystery and some of the sometimes I got books that I didn't order, and I know that my books were ordered for another guy or for another girl. So all of a sudden I had, and we didn't have much, so I had to read it, and okay, this guy's pretty good. By chance,
Maybe it was early
intervened.
Amazon. If you like this, you might also like. And they just sent you.
The same thing with Amazon. Okay. But
I have to say this just because Nimrod used to be in a band that I think we all grew up on,
Of course.
and it's such an insane just personal moment for us to be in a panel with him.
yeah, I'm a rock
Are you
star
a rock
in
star?
Israel.
Oh, okay.
But I think I like drawing comic books just as much as singing on stage. It's something that I've loved doing. I think every exhibitor here is something that, you're hooked. You can't do nothing about it. You're hooked. And of course, Daniel Claus and Charles Burns in Mocha Festival. I mean, everybody loved Charles Burns and Daniel. Because you get Peter Bagg in that batch as well.
Yeah.
We all know them, and we all admire their works. Chris Ware, of course.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The usual indie suspects. So we've looked at Israeli influences. We've looked at influences outside of Israel. Now let's look at influences outside of comics. Keren, you talked about being inspired by YouTube clips of the dancer Pina Bausch.
Oh.
And Lior has talked about films like Jellyfish, which was written or directed perhaps by Edgar Keret, who you've mentioned also earlier. So I find it more interesting actually to read comics when it's clear that the person who's created them is not just reading comics, but is reading literature novels and watching movies and looking at going to museums. So can you talk about some of the non-comics influences that you each incorporate into your work?
Well, I'm doing now a comic book for school, but I'm really influenced by, that's it, I'm blacking out. I'm reading a book, what's the name of the writer? She just won a Nobel Prize, so. No, she's Canadian. Alice Munro, yeah, and I don't know how I forgot. I'm really influenced by the way she tells stories, because she has collections of short stories, and I like how she writes herself in so many characters. You can actually feel that it's her. When it's a man or a woman or an old man, it doesn't matter. It's always her story, and it's really quiet, and I'm really influenced now when I write my comic, because to bring yourself into different characters without just being upfront, this is me, this is what happened, how to not conceal it, but wrap it in a style of your own. So she really influenced me a lot. Edgar Keret is amazing in telling short stories. For me, he's also a really big influence. So writers like that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we go like this.
Yeah, why not?
As said earlier, that I'm also a musician, so music means a lot to me. Is that where I get my some of my inspiration from. My father is a well-known actor for theater and for television, for movies. So I grew up loving movies, and basically I grew up in the theater. I was an actor myself for several years. And so a good play or a good show or a record, or I have some friends who are artists, contemporary art, not dealing with comic books at all, who I receive something from them. So I think if you are an author for visual storytelling, you have to act like a director. That is, you have to have a sense of rhythm, like in music, or you have to have like a sense of putting the whole image together, like a photographer, or like a choreograph in dancing. So I must say that I enjoy all art forms. I wasn't like that when I was a young kid. I only listened to that kind of music, but you know, you become a conformist as long when you grow up. You know that some of the things that you had a stern opinion about, you were a fool. So everything from an old John Ford Western to I don't know, like a Frank Frazetta artwork to Peter Cooper is here, cartoonist who is very funny.
Brilliant.
And I think if you like to create, don't put any boundaries. I mean, just let yourself go and let yourself enjoy it.
You have to be a sponge.
Yeah, like a sponge. That's
For
right.
everything.
Can you say
Absolutely.
sponge? Yeah, well,
Yeah, you can say sponge.
yes, you can
Absolutely.
say sponge.
It doesn't
But can
mean
you say it
anything
in
bad
Hebrew?
here. I cannot.
What's being bad in Hebrew?
What's a what?
Why wouldn't you be able to say sponge?
Oh, if it has the same meaning of soaking up.
Yeah,
If
like
it's- If it's something you use
yeah.
as a word to describe
An
being
expression, a
open to
metaphor.
influences.
Yeah.
Anyway, talk about Pina Bausch.
No, we can say it in Hebrew. We just were wondering if in English it sounds the
Yeah,
same.
it sounds
and
the
not
same
just-
because in Hebrew it's spongia. It's like
Yeah.
when you wash the room, whatever.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
So Keren, you mentioned Pina Bausch, and I think when you guys see some of Keren's work, you'll see the dancing influence in kind of the disposition of the bodies of the people that she draws. You talked also about Franz Mesmer and cookbook photographs of poultry as being things that affect you or influence you. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, just going back to comics has a personal draw to me because it's just in the language of comics is a combination of things. You combine words and text, and then you combine different influences, and you just add combinations over combinations over combinations. And I like deciphering that in other artists, what their influences were. So my previous career, from age 4 to 18, a little bit into 19, I was a classical ballet dancer, and that was my entire life. And
You were
so
saying you were a classical
ballet dancer.
ballet dancer.
I
I
also
heard
heard
belly
belly
dancer.
dancing,
Now there's a ballet dancer and a classical ballet dancer. That's something I got to draw.
Oh, do you know Leela Corman?
What?
Yeah, Leela Corman is a
She's a belly dancer cartoonist who
Yeah,
does
well-
amazing. Just okay.
Yeah.
Does she does that simultaneously or?
I don't think so. I think
But she
has
does
to
amazing comics about belly dancing in Egypt, and yeah.
Okay, that's another thing.
Side note. So all of my books have been about movements. I guess I'm compensating for my muscle deterioration. But I'm really I have an entire book that's Chronicles of the Falling Women about falling, and Pina Bausch, her actors fall constantly over and over again on stage, and she was a big influence on me when I was a dancer, and it continued. But then I have a book that's entirely about Rubik's Cube champions because I was watching their clips of when they speed cube, they sort of... So I have a book that's just about that finger movement, and then another Uncontested Spaces, my new book, is about guerrilla poets in the MoMA and and just about the movement of surprise of the visitors to the MoMA who suddenly hear this giant voice screaming poetry unexpectedly. But I'm very drawn to movement, so I guess that's something that I incorporate into my books.
I guess I mentioned jellyfish because it's really evocative, and I mean, to me, it's like, I think in comics, I long to replicate certain feelings that things give me. And so from Anne and Green Gables, which is like really cheesy, but it's like the story, like that romantic feeling, or the feeling of like, she always talks about space for the imagination and things like that. And also, I'm also influenced a lot by, because I draw, most of my comics are without panels. So I'm really influenced by Japanese and Chinese ink paintings, because there is a sense of, what Scott McCloud calls closure. There is that space in the imagination, and it doesn't have to be between frames.
There's continuity.
Yeah. So a lot of really sad stories. I enjoy a really good cry.
So I see that I'm worried about time, and so I don't want to spend a ton of time on the current comics landscape. I think I'm just going to kind of go through these so the audience can see some of the cartoonists.
Let me just give a one-liner on each and every one of them.
Okay, but I have a question about all of them by the
Okay.
time we get to the end. But if you want to give a one-line, go.
Okay, that's a
go.
Dorit Mayasgur Falafel Man. Yeah, that's right, Falafel Man. It's a very well-known comic book in Israel. I think it's the most sold-out comic book, series. And that's Amos Ellenberg. Dorit Mayasgur is the head, also the cartoonist, is also the head of the Cartoonists Association. She's an ex-QB, she's a QB, like an ex-Joel Kubert school.
One sentence.
Okay, that's it. Amos Ellenberg is a very funny guy, as you can see. He does stuff with a guy called Nimrod Reshef, and they're really they're funny. They're like Gary Larson's
The Far Side.
The Far Side, something like that. A very big influence on them. Next, Uri Fink Saberman. Okay, Uri Fink is the longest running comic book author in Israel. He is the soul and the body of Israel comic books in the 80s mostly. He's well known for his Zbang series, which is funny, like Archie comics, basically, like an Israeli Archie comics. Yeah, but this was his first book, Saberman, the first Israeli superhero. That's right, Saberman. And Boris Ehrenburg is one of the, as of late, a lot of people from immigrants from the Eastern Europe and especially from Russia came over to Israel, and they brought their own unique way of cartooning. Something which you can say for a lot of Russian cartoonists in Israel, they don't really deal with politics as much as they deal. Their caricatures is more like on a very philosophical, what you would expect from a Russian, I don't know, blues singer, or you got those. Everything is they're very harsh about things.
Heavy.
They're heavy. So there's a lot of great ideas that you can. Yeah, Michel Kishka is like a very big name in Israel. He's he's from Belgium, and he's really responsible for a lot of the how do you say
Franco-Belgian.
Franco-Belgian comic book genre in Israel. He has just made a great book. It's called The Second Generation. It's the memories of his father, of his own as a little kid. That's right. And okay. And Hanoch Piven is he's South American.
Is the mustache on Sacha Baron Cohen made of what I think it's made out of? Okay, just checking.
He has a very unique way of doing stuff. And he's what can I say?
I think that image kind of speaks for itself.
Says it all. Yeah, that's right. Yaakov Shilo is one of the pioneers there on the very he's one of the pioneers. That's all I can say. Yuval Lubitschek is another funny guy, very Tel Avivian by nature. The whole Shlomo Cohen. Shlomo Cohen is maybe Israel's most everyday. Yeah, he's funny, huh?
This is Angela Merkel, yeah.
That's Angela Merkel. That's right.
And Greece.
Trying
Greece
to
up on
save
blocks.
the European.
Trying to save Greece.
That's right.
What is she saying?
She's saying, and thank you for choosing our services.
Nice.
Shlomo Cohen is maybe the most. He has a daily cartoon. And he is known for his portraits. He's doing like Drew Friedman portraits, the same technique, and amazing. And Arkady Tsikun is just like what I said about Ehrenburg. It's part of the Russian mobs, the Russian gang.
The melancholy.
Yeah.
So my question for probably for you, Nimrod, but for anyone is. A lot of these examples that mostly you sent me of the current Israeli comic scene are very political.
Yeah.
So what is that kind of a accurate assessment of the current scene? Is the current comic scene in Israel for the most part very involved in current politics? Are there any people who just tell stories without political overtones?
Well, there are cartoons and there are comic books, right? And cartoons, well, they tend to be more political since they are on the newspaper and they have to reflect what's going on in the headlines. But for a cartoonist, that's all they can do, relate to the stuff they see and hear on the
Yeah, I was
on the
wondering if
media.
it's even possible to avoid making political statements in the arts in modern day Israel.
Israel is all about, it's a lot of
really hard.
actualism. Yeah, it's like you have to, and we're
We're hooked on news.
Yeah, we're hooked
All
on
of
news.
us.
Everything. Oh, you heard that? No. What's the latest? What's the word on the street? So you can't really separate those two. But
that makes
for
sense.
graphic novels, sometimes I think in graphic novels we tend to escape to another land. To this, we take it in another manner.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear this. That's
Okay,
our
so let-
escapism for
So
us.
let's look at
Yeah.
some of the work of you guys, and we'll
Okay.
start with Keren. I've got 2 slides for everybody. This is Keren in color and Keren in black and white. This one, I love this. Mr. Binun, were you watching? This is a linked slices of bread making a blanket.
This is actually autobiographical.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I went to a restaurant and I ordered bread and I sliced it and I sewed it and then I took it over my head and I went out. It happened.
Why did you do that?
Oh, art school, confidential, like
So this is a page from this book right here, Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Coat Check Dream. And I was amused when I saw this, when you gave me this book, because you and I are both frequent attendees of Ben Ketcher's weekly symposia, and he of course did one of his musical things, Check Room Romance. So was this in any way affected by that? Was this a
it was no, because I
concurrently
went.
developing?
My very first date when I was my very first date ever when I was 20 was my date bought a baguette and then we went to the museum of Tel Aviv and then they asked us, they said, you have to check your baguette. And I thought that was so funny that they put it on the shelf and it kind of looked like a bakery for a second. So I had this thing with coat checks ever since. And then David Sandlin, who was my advisor at SVA, told me about Ben
Nice.
Ketcher's opera and so I of course gave Ben this.
Of course.
And then when I was selling it at SPX, 2 people came up to me and said, we met and fell in love in the coat check while working in the coat check. So I thought that was...
Aw, that's nice. So there is something very romantic about a coat check. Lior.
That's mine.
Oh. Oh my God, are you serious? Did I totally screw this up? Oh, that's embarrassing. So let's just, let's not pay any attention there. I was doing this, I can just tell you, I was doing this till 1 o'clock in the morning, so maybe it's been a crazy week. So Alina, pretend that you're Lior and tell us what's happening here. Can you read it for us first in English?
This is a first page of a book that I did of Meira Firon. She's a children's book writer. It's about 2 sisters. It's mostly about the younger sister that is having trouble with her older sister. And I really like this book because it's really playful and I'm the younger sister, so I know how hard it is.
So now I'm really nervous about this second image, whether it's going to be you or Lior.
I think it's not
Leor.
mine. Yeah, it's
Oh, Alina, I think I may have really screwed you over on this one. I'm really sorry.
And probably there'll be like one of Alina's.
I
one of
hope
mine's
so. I'm
again.
hoping that I've got one of Alina's later on. So can you talk a little bit about this one? This one is not the one you sent me. This is one I actually found on my own. And I was going to take it out when you sent me your slides. And then I thought it was really kind of appropriate for a comics festival to put something in this. So can you talk a little bit about it and your work?
This is a diary comic. It's about my feelings.
All right then, moving on.
I draw a lot. I just graduated, so I draw a lot, and I've sketchbooks filled with comics that I just, in this internet age, it's really hard to put stuff out there. So this is a little thing I drew about my feelings about that.
Well, I very much hope I have another image of yours farther down. Because next up, Nimrod, I had actually chosen a different image before you sent me yours. I'd found a page from Uzi that I just thought was so insanely beautiful. But then you sent me really 10 images in a row that showed this process.
Like the process.
Step-by-step process. And
Yeah.
since I'm collecting creator archives now, and one of my things that I find so fascinating is seeing this process, I wanted people to see from this fairly rough sketch to this very finished version, how you work. And there's seriously, guys, there's 7 intermediary steps, especially in between the first and the second panel here. There's so many layers of how you introduce the inks.
That's right. Well, what can I say about Uzi? Is just one of my comic book series. As I said, Israel is a very small industry, so you have, if you want to make a living, you have to adjust yourself to different crowds and to work in different ways. So when we do Uzis, mostly, when I say we do, I mean me and my wife. She does the coloring and some of the inks. So we try to take it step by step. And you know what they say about art? It's never really done. It's just abandoned along the way. So we try to make it as good as we can, you know, to make it. And then it's off to the next page. What can I say about it? Every author knows that it takes time. Okay, there's another. As I said, we have to
Very
please a
different
lot of crowds.
styles,
That's
yeah.
right. So yeah,
Really
that's right.
different
So we
styles.
have-
So this is Eddie Balagan, yeah?
That's Eddie Balagan. Yeah, that's from his upcoming book, the third one. And as you can see, it's done with. No, it's not really aquarelle, but it's a computerized aquarelle for that matter. And at the same time, we do cartoons like your everyday regular cartoon. The room was too small, it has no window, no bed, and the light switch doesn't work. Madam, it's the elevator.
That reminded me of that old Jewish joke about the person who's complaining, goes to a restaurant and is telling somebody, you know, and this is, you know, the meat was overdone and
The pickle was not right.
right, and the portions were so small. So now I'm completely at a loss as to who I'm showing next. Oh gosh.
It's okay.
So no, it's not okay because I think I really shortchanged Lior, and I feel very bad.
Practice your Hebrew.
So this was actually no. This is practicing my what email message am I taking these images from? So this was actually one I'd found on my own.
Can do no harm.
And then you also and then you sent me a bunch and I took it out and like, oh, I'll use hers. But then I saw you sent me this one as well, and I thought this was good. But because I really love this panel right here, which I felt encapsulated a lot of the cartoonists' angst and anxiety, and you know.
This actually is really made for illustrators. You remember, like 2 years ago, there was a sheet someone says.
Yeah, shit my dad says.
Yeah, so this is sheet illustrator says, and there is an English version of it.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to put the Hebrew up. I figured, you know,
okay.
because I found both, but.
So it's all about frustration and waiting for
Really, I didn't
Facebook
pick up on that at all. And then this also is about, I guess, obsessive compulsive behavior.
Yeah, this is it was from my final project in my undergrad. And it was based on, I was really hooked on This American Life, and David Sedaris, I admire him.
He's
and
great.
this is one of his stories, actually, that was on This American Life, so I had to do it.
It's his story.
Yeah, it's his story. It's about his childhood. He was really obsessive, compulsive about a lot of stuff.
It's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So because I completely shortchanged Lior, she has something here that she can show and talk a little bit about her current work.
You can find it at table C16. It's a comic about Tel Aviv. So, like I said, I work in crazy ink, lots of ink, redrawing things. I draw very fast and I redraw everything.
But you can see from the color, especially on the cover, that you're influenced by the Christina Kadmon style of painting.
Romantic.
That's nice. So we have literally like 15 minutes left, and I bet you're all wondering if you would ever get a chance to ask questions. And now is your moment. So I will see if anybody has a hand up. Does anybody have a hand up? Ask a question. Yes, Ellen.
Well, two questions.
Excellent.
The first question is when you just showed a comic that was in Hebrew and you chose not to show it in English. Who's doing the lettering when it's bilingual?
Me.
Oh, both. So
Yeah,
Hebrew
both.
and English. And then in the beginning.
You know, you read it from left to right.
Yeah, I flip it.
So you're making a literal translation and you're doing a picture.
And you have to flip horizon everything,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. You have to
So-
flip everything
It's the
and
manga
ask for
problem.
advice from
Exactly.
people
Yeah,
who
it's,
speak.
it's the manga problem as well. So if you got things in the background like signs and stuff, you have to, sometimes you have to draw it from the get-go because they're,
So you're starting with a script, but you may have to change it a little.
since I think I speak for all of us, do you write, basically when you start to write, you start to write in Hebrew, right? Because that's, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it depends. If before I was starting to write in Hebrew, because now I'm doing something in English, I rather start writing in English, because when you start thinking the language, you feel it more,
Yeah.
and it's really important, I think. When you translate stuff, it's not the same. You always need a writer to translate books, so it loses something, I think.
I'll let a professional translator do my work.
Exactly,
It's like,
yeah.
what can I say? I dream in Hebrew, I sing in Hebrew, I think in Hebrew, so that's my tools,
But it
basically.
doesn't affect the images, so if you're doing a script and you were saying, okay, coming in from the right, and you had to flip it,
Yeah.
then you would cut.
Do you know why we write Hebrew from left to right?
I'm supposed to know.
Tell us. Okay, because it is such a, well, it's a biblical language, right? And we didn't use ink. We used a sector, how do you say that?
A chisel.
A chisel. And we used to do it like this, right?
So everybody in the biblical era was right-handed, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and you know what they did to a left-handed person? Yeah, well, it was Cain's.
The sin of Cain, yeah.
Sign of
Yeah.
Cain, that's right.
But because Hebrew was first, English is backwards.
Well, you got it all wrong. You got it all wrong.
That makes sense to me now.
Do you ever shift your images to because the context could shift from language to language and country to country, so do you ever make subtle changes to your images to compensate for that, to keep it in humor?
Yeah, of course, all the time. All the time. It's like, it seems like, why should they? But we do it all the time. You know, there's the crumb, there's the crumb, how do you call it? האחרון שלו.
His latest?
No,
Genesis?
האחרון שלו. Are you kidding?
Sorry, I didn't sleep.
I asked her in Hebrew, his latest, she translated his latest. Yeah, right. Bereshit, Genesis, the book of Genesis. And there's the character, he points towards he points towards the east or towards the west. I can't really recall. And you have to flip it in Hebrew, so I think it really hurts the meaning, because when you see like Gustav Dorés art, like he always points to the west, right? Or something, right? And
But-
well, you have to take
Yeah,
things
and,
like
like,
that
being
into
fair
I
consideration.
don't think there's north, south, east, and west in hell.
Well,
There's also
I haven't been there yet. But I survived Tel Aviv, so it gotta stand for something.
There's also, I'm really addicted to Radiolab, and they have this show about symmetry, but also, because Rutu Modan, she flips her books, because she publishes simultaneously with Drawn and Quarterly and with Israel, and so the side of but she does, and I know this from a friend who's a fantasy illustrator. When she draws a likeness of someone, she constantly, she draws digitally, and she constantly flips the image right to left, just because when it doesn't seem to matter, but if you draw something and you flip it, it looks so different, even if it's the same person. Even if you were to flip my face now, you wouldn't recognize me.
The mirror.
They say that if you're only used to seeing your face in a mirror, but
Right.
apparently that if you go to a special kind of mirror that lets you see it as other people see you,
real
you
mirror.
don't
There's a
recognize it. It
place
freaks
in
you
New
out.
York that has the truth mirror.
Yeah, Amanda,
And-
thank you. I get enough truth in my life.
And also, I think that not only the language, but when you draw, and then I love this book, Drawing is a Way of Thinking, or Comics is a Way of Thinking. That I think that's what it's called, the collection of essays. You really think differently in different language, also visually. When I think of and these associations that come even at the level of adding color. When I think in Hebrew, I have a very specific, separate set of associations that come with it than when I think that could be temperature, movement, and it all affects it. So, but I publish my in very independently and very small scale, but I feel like for bigger scale cartoonists like Rutu or like Nimrod, it really, you have to put a lot of extra thought into it.
Yeah. And Rutu writes in Hebrew originally, even though her books get published in English originally. I only write in English, but I have this uncanny problem that I can't seem to shake off. Like even when I was in Israel and I was drawing the cover for this, and I drew it the wrong way around. Whenever I do like a book project, I like bind it and I'm like, it's the wrong way around again.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi. Are there any Israeli comics projects that you're looking forward to, and that anybody's doing, like something you guys are working on that you're really looking forward to?
Like projects of other
Artists.
Either or.
Well, Gilad is in the middle of writing, Selector, Farm 54 is in the middle of writing a new autobiographical, I think, a new book, which I'm looking for. And all those people we mentioned, always looking for the next Rutu Modan.
There's once a year the comic festival which takes place at middle of August, right?
when it's really hot.
Where it's really hot, yeah. And the air condition doesn't work all the time. Anyway, but it's like, this is like when all the authors are releasing their new projects. So for us, it's really like we're waiting for anything, you know. This is you just give it to us. You know,
another thing.
Hands extended.
Another thing I should mention that Israel has.
It's a community, basically.
Yeah. Well, Michelle Kishka was the first person to bring a comics course to an Israeli. To
Betzalel.
To Betzalel, and Rutu was his student, and he always starts each lesson by piling a bunch of comic books that you can't get in Israel on the table, and it's very inspiring.
Just French comics.
Yeah, well, but there are 100 students that graduate from my department each year, and then another 100 from Alina School, Shankar, there's another one in Holon and Haifa. So there's this thing that it's coming up now in July for August. In the comics festival, you see the fresh grads. They always do a new anthology of comics that they did either in Kishka's class or in Rutu's class or in Hanukkah's class, and they all have their but then they dissipate. It dissipates, and because you can't make a living, so they either become graphic designers or illustrators, or they move to Berlin. But it's very exciting because it's really, they don't do it for money. It's not their job. They're just fresh out of school, and they do these beautiful anthologies. Omer Hoffman, who was here in New York for 2 years, also spoke at the New York Comic Symposium, has this really beautiful book about Tel Aviv based in another city, which is a collective of, and after that strip, no one else does another strip for like years, but it's always very exciting. So that's a yearly thing that I look forward to, is seeing the new anthologies. Well, yeah.
So is going to Berlin punishment?
Oh no! Everyone, all of my peers from my graduating class are now in Berlin, because I think living is very cheap, and they also make it very accessible for Israelis to get visas there.
I was thinking a grandpa that was.
Oh yeah, everyone
Everybody
in
had
Israel.
a grandpa in Germany.
I was thinking of that Oscar Wilde line from, I think it's Lady Windermere's Fan. When good Americans die, they go to Paris. Where do bad Americans go? Where they die, they go to America. So one more question. Yes.
Yeah. I was just wondering, is the comic scene in Israel, even though you mentioned it's still small and up and coming, is there an animation and film scene, or do you mostly just dub the movies that come?
There's huge Israeli film scene,
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
There was an interesting.
They win Oscars a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Waltz with Bashir.
Do you want to approach it?
Oh, sorry.
No, okay.
I just want to mention something quick. Probably you know more about it. That they started. Well, Bezalel's animation department was voted recently one of the best animation departments in the world, and there's a really good animation department, and they have a lot of exchange programs, and they started doing this thing that I think fell through, is that they wanted to have an animation company like Pixar in Jerusalem and have people work on, and they started working on the 2-year feature, and they took a lot of graduates. But I think there's a huge scene, and
But it's not
Well,
the
huge
money making crazy.
No.
Yeah, well.
I mean
it's
huge
a really
roster.
struggling small scene.
Yeah, I meant a huge roster of talent.
Yeah, a lot of talent we have. Yeah.
That's a different story.
Well, I think Pixar can slip it off. I mean, we're not for the next years to come. But as we have to schlep things, we have to do all sorts of things to make both ends meet. So we do, I think I do at least, I do a lot of storyboarding. And I work a lot with productions and with production managements and production houses. So I know that there is a lot of animation in Israel, but as I said, you really need the funds in order to make a long something like one of those Pixar movies. It's really complicated, and I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Yeah,
But we are trying to, if you can't, you know, about art, this is about, you have to, when you have boundaries, you have to work within those boundaries and to overcome it, and to try to make those boundaries, I mean, to take them and to put them into use. I mean, if you don't have a lot of money, so how can I be original? How can I overcome this obstacle? And we tend to do it a lot in Israel, in every aspect, I must say. We can do, if we have a problem, yeah, we can okay, we can do it. We can do it. It's, we don't have a manual for nothing.
They say that about Terry Gilliam, that when he was doing like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, they had no budget, and that's why he had the coconut shows.
Yeah. And it
He
works.
gets a lot of money, and he does
works.
Baron Munchausen, and it's, you know, it's an unholy mess. Anyway, okay, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Laura and Karen and Nimrod and Alina. Go buy comics. You're C6. You're also C6 now?
C16.
C16? No table, no table?
Mine only in Hebrew.
Okay. Well, go buy comics
Thank you,
anyway.
Karen.
Oh, thank you. Bye.